So my name is Ashley. I'm from Tiffin, Ohio. I am 33 years old, and right now I'm celebrating a year and a half in recovery from opiates. So starting out, growing up, it was me and an older sibling. I had two parents in my household, but growing up, I grew up in an alcoholic family. My dad is an alcoholic. He was functioning, he had a job, but as soon as he came home from work, I was just drinking. So my mom cared for my brother and I. My dad was present, but not present. My mom's the one who went to all my sporting events. My mom's the one who made sure we had what we needed. So growing up, I was around a lot of partying. My mom was an occasional drinker on the weekends and such, but her side of the family, drinking was heavily involved. Any family get-togethers, that's just what I was around. I was around adults drinking and smoking weed. So when I got older, when I was in middle school, I was involved in sports. I played softball and I played basketball. But in middle school is when I got around a different crowd of people, and it sounds so cliche, but I wanted to be cool and I wanted to fit in. So I hung out with the girls who were smoking cigarettes and smoking weed. So that's what I started doing. And I think the first bad thing that happened was I didn't make the basketball team because I was told I could not run fast enough, probably because I was smoking. So after that, sports stopped for me. And my eighth grade year, I was drinking, smoking weed, smoking cigarettes, and I started to experiment with cough medicine. Um, it's something a lot of younger people do to start getting high. You can abuse cough medicine and get a trip off of it. So I started doing that along with all my whole group of friends. I was busted by my mom, and for my freshman year of high school, my mom made me transfer to a different school. So starting out high school with nobody I knew, but naturally, I'm an addict, so I found other people who are like-minded. I found people at school that wanted to do the same wrong things that I wanted to do. So I just found a different group of people there. Um, when I was going to school there, that's when I caught my first charge. I caught an underage drinking charge when I was 14. Um, at that time, my mom grounded me. I got a license suspension before my license was even able to be there. I had to go to a class, and a man who was in a nursing home who had been harmed by a drunk driver, he spoke and told his story. I had to go listen to that. None of it really stopped me. I still continued to do what I was doing, drinking and smoking. Um, my mom is such a good mom, and she just wants to believe anything that I say. So after a year at this new school, I convinced my mom that everything was going to be okay and just send me back to Tiffin City School so I could be with my friends. So she did. She sent me back to Tiffin City School, and it was still continuing on shenanigans, abusing cough medicine, partying. At this point in school, we actually had those fake babies that we'd take home and care for the weekend. Myself and my best friend had babies at the same time, and we actually took our babies to a party with us. And my baby got shaken at the party, and my other friend's baby got killed at the party because that's how irresponsible we were and took babies to a party. So, after that, I was really good friends with this one girl, and she had a mother who was addicted to substances. So she was never home. So this is the house we always like to go to and hang out. I mean, we could do whatever we wanted to do, and there was really no consequences for it. My mom, like I said, she just wanted to believe anything that came out of my mouth. I mean, I think naturally addicts are good bullshitters, so that's what I did. I went to school. I got good grades in school. I was just not acting right outside of school. Shortly after all of this, I began to get introduced to LSD and ecstasy. I began abusing that on a regular basis. I also got my first real boyfriend, and he was one of those bad boys here in town. So I wanted to be cool. I wanted to fit in. That's what I gravitated towards. So when I started dating him is when I was introduced to the different substances like LSD and ecstasy. I was abusing these substances and still going to school. Um, at this age, I actually moved out of my parents' house and moved in with my boyfriend at the time in the 10th grade. He was always in trouble. He abused substances as well. He had a very addictive family. They're well known in our town. Anybody hears that last name and it's trouble. So dated him for a few years, was doing all those substances. When we finally broke up, actually was like my senior year of high school, and about this time is when I was introduced to opiates. This is a time that the pharmaceutical companies were doing a really big push. Nobody talked about addiction, nobody talked about withdrawal. We just knew that we did them and they made us feel good. I can remember going to the hospital with a toothache, and I got sent home with a 30-day supply of Percocets. Um, and I never understood what addiction or withdrawal was, and because I just always had them. But then it got to the point where like I didn't have them, and I can remember the first time I felt sickness, and I was with a different boyfriend at the time, and we both looked at each other like, man, I don't feel good. I feel like I have the flu. And we started talking to one of our friends who was a nurse who also abused substances, and he said, you guys are going through withdrawal. And I'm like, there's no way I'm withdrawing because I'm not a junkie and I'm not a fiend. And I was withdrawing. So I went out, I purchased what I needed to purchase, and I got myself better. Um, at that time, it was just pills, painkillers. Um, I did that for a while. I actually graduated high school, addicted to opiates. And then my plan was to move 3 hours away for college. And I was going to go to school to be a substance abuse counselor while abusing substances. I moved 3 hours away with my boyfriend to go to school for that. And sitting in these classes, it was so weird. It was social services, criminal justice, and corrections all together. And I sat in these classes. So many of these people were either in recovery from substances, currently using substances, had been to prison, whatever. So I was around my type of people. And then naturally, I just found people down there so where I could get what I needed to get. And actually, down there, I was introduced to stronger painkillers called opiates. So that became the new habit. My boyfriend at the time, he also abused substances. While I was down in college, I thought it was a great idea to get married to my boyfriend. We had been together for a year. So I went to the courthouse, got married, called my mom afterwards to let her know what had happened. She wasn't very happy. Um, so we continued going to school and such, but it was in southern Ohio, and we were near Athens, Kentucky, West Virginia, and it was a very poor economy. I struggled finding a job, even at McDonald's, the movie theater, anything, could not find a job. Financial aid did help pay the rent. My now husband had been in the military, so he was receiving pay for going to school, but we were both addicted to substances, so it was either getting what we needed to feel good or pay our bills. Um, it was a 2-year program. I had 6 months left before I would graduate, and I had to drop out because it got to the point where our car was going to get repossessed. So my parents came down last minute, packed up a whole house for us and we moved back home with my parents. We lived in a laundry room with a mattress on the floor. My brother, his girlfriend, and their baby also lived there. I continued to use pain pills as well as my husband. We would get jobs and, the same old thing. We'd either be late too many times, be sick from calling in, etc. Jobs didn't last, so we were in and out, in and out. And then they started cutting pain pill prescriptions, so they were harder to find, and if you were finding them, they cost a lot of money. This is when I was introduced to heroin. I had a friend who got out of prison, and I had been speaking to him about my situation with the pain pills, and he introduced me to the next best thing. So from that point, I started using heroin regularly. Um, I feel like, and my husband did as well, I feel like for a while we maintained doing just the little bits to feel okay, but your tolerance builds very, very fast. Um, and then, working jobs and having bills, like the same thing that happened in Athens, it's hard to pay your bills and stuff when you have a substance use problem. So, I started turning to other things in order to make money to feed my addiction. I've sold myself, I've stole from people, gone to pawn shops with broken things, ripped them off to get money. I started just doing whatever I could in order to get high. And obviously, some of the stuff I did affected my marriage. And things were great for my marriage until they weren't. I feel like when addiction really hit us, that's when we became very abusive to each other. It was not coming from just one side. Both of us were equally physically, mentally, emotionally, financially abusive to each other. Um, so this is how we played the game for a few years. And then the worst thing and the thing that was the final straw for my marriage was my husband had actually punched me in the face and I had to walk around with a black eye. At that point, he moved out. And after that, we would just stay in contact, talking on the phone or texting. We were trying to work on things, I guess. So then I decided I wanted to try to get clean. So I started buying Suboxone off of the street and was dosing myself that way. And it worked. I mean, I got off the dope and I was just on Suboxone. And then after that, I had lost my driver's license because I was driving without insurance. So I didn't have my driver's license and I had lied to my grandmother and said I had my driver's license, so she let me borrow her car for a day. And it just so happened that that day somebody saw my husband at Walmart with another female. So I showed up to Walmart and caused a scene in the parking lot and assaulted somebody with lots of people watching. At the point I didn't care. Um, I was sober off the drugs, but that was basically it. I didn't do any work on myself. So I was a very angry person. I didn't really know how to respond in certain situations. So that's what happened. Thankfully, I guess nothing really came of it, but that was the end of my marriage. So after that, I did Suboxone for a while, and then I wanted to get off of Suboxone, and nobody really told me how bad the withdrawal coming off of Suboxone was. So, um, I made it about 2 weeks, and I dealt with a lot of restlessness, and I couldn't sleep. So I just decided to start doing heroin again. So, I'm back on heroin. And at this point, I was introduced to different people in order to get what I needed. And I met people who came down from Detroit, Michigan, and I could buy larger quantities for a smaller price. So I began doing that, and things got rolling. I was getting more, so I'm doing more. Um, at one point, I think I was up to about 3 grams a day. And this is when I had a car at the time. I got my license back and all that, got that done. So then I had a car. Um, and this is where trouble began for me again. I was always driving and I was under the influence. I actually caught my first OVI. I was on heroin, Xanax, and marijuana, and I nodded out at the wheel. I'm lucky to be alive. I'm lucky I remembered to put on my seatbelt. I crashed into a very deep, large ditch, and my car straddled it perfectly. I woke up when the airbag hit me, and I got out of my car. The first person I called was my mother, and this was at 3 a.m. I'm telling her what's happening, and she's like, "Well, where are you?" I had no idea where I was. I was so high driving that I was nodding out driving, missing turns, missing stop signs. I really had no idea where I was. I had to jog to the corner to find a street sign to tell my mother where I was because I was in the middle of the country. Um, she sent my dad and my brother out to the scene, and my mom said I needed to call the police or she was going to call the police on me. I begged her and my brother to please just say they were driving my car. Please say they were driving my car, and nobody, it was me. So I called the sheriff on myself. The sheriff that came out there was one of 4 in Seneca County that was trained to know when people were under the influence of opiates. Um, Obviously, I'd been doing this for a couple years. He knew to look at my eyes. He knew to look at my nose. If you're a frequent snorter, you'll have nose hairs missing in your nose. Like, he just knew things to look at. And I still sat there and I tried to BS this man. So he had asked for a blood sample and I refused. And I was very high. So this is kind of like in and out. I can remember refusing. I can remember my dad telling me, "Sis, you probably really need to do this." And next thing I know, I woke up in the ambulance and my blood was being taken. The sheriff did tell me, "This is your court date. I will not have your blood sample back by your court date. So you're going to go in there and you're going to plead guilty." I'm like, okay. So I tried to sober up for a couple days and I was sick. I was around not the right people and they were using, and they convinced me that I was not going to get drug tested at court and everything was going to be fine. So I'm off and running. And then my court date came. I was very dirty for my court date. I was drug tested at my court date, and I don't know how, but I did not fail for opiates. I failed for Xanax, and that was it. So I got placed on non-reporting probation, and shenanigans continued for me. My license was suspended. I convinced my grandmother to buy me another car. I put it in somebody else's name, and that's what I drove. I had that car for about a month before I nodded out and wrecked that car. Um, I can remember that day I was on my way to Mother's Day with my grandmother, aunts and uncles, and everybody at my mom's house. When I wrecked my car, I busted my face on the steering wheel, so I swelled up and I bruised almost immediately. Showed up to my mom's house after this accident because all I got a ticket was failure to control. I don't know. Showed up to my mom's house with my beat up face. I made up a lie as to how it happened. My mom played along because, like I said, other family members were there. The next morning, when I woke up, she said to me, I don't know what happened yesterday and I don't know what you were on, but I don't want to see you like that again." And I said, "Okay." And I walked out the house and I went to go get more stuff. So like I said, I got in that trouble and I got placed on non-reporting probation. I got referred to a drug and alcohol counseling place where they do an assessment and they say whatever classes they think I need. I'm a very good bullshitter. I went in there and I just blew smoke up this man's ass and I told him that I'm not an addict. I have no idea why I'm here. I was out with some friends from high school, blah, blah, blah. And this man said, "I agree. I don't know why you're here." And he signed me off after 3 visits. So I was like, cool, and I continued on doing my shenanigans. After that, I was contacted by my probation officer about 2 weeks later, and they had asked me about the firelands paperwork, and I had told them what happened and said that they were going to send the paperwork over. Probation then said that I needed to go to their office and give them the paper, and it would be very quick. Um, I knew I was using at the time. I was working, and I told them I could stop by quickly to drop off the paper, but I was on my way to work. When I got up to their office, I gave them the paper and they demanded a drug screen from me. Um, I did not have to go to the bathroom, but I also did not want to go to the bathroom for them. So I said I needed to get to work. They asked what time I worked. If I remember correctly, I had to be there at 8:30 in the morning. So they told me, okay, 8 a.m. tomorrow and you'll be here. And so, I thought real hard about it. It's either not show up and get a warrant and end up in jail or show up and see what happens. Um, at the time, I feel my mother knew I used substances but didn't want to believe it because I was functioning. I did have a job and whatever. Just I feel it was different than some other people's situations. So I had told my mother I was in trouble with probation that I was dirty for marijuana, so I needed a detox kit and I had no money, so my mom went out and spent a little bit of money buying me detox drinks and detox pills. I went and bought drug tests to show opiates on it, and I woke up the next morning at 5 in the morning and just started drinking all these different things, taking tests, and it was not working. So 7:45 came, and I got in the car and I headed up to probation. And this is where recovery started for me. I gave him a urine sample, and she just turned and looked at me, and I said, "I'm dirty for heroin, right?" And she was like, "Yeah. How often do you use?" And I said, "Well, I don't know anybody who uses this who doesn't use it daily." So, I asked if there was any options of Suboxone or something to help me detox, and she refused me Suboxone. She said I needed to either go home and detox or I could go to the Seneca County Jail and detox. At this point, I'd never been in jail, so going home was what I chose to do. This was on a Thursday, and I partied for a few more days until Sunday, and that's when I began to detox. I'd never fully gone through it before. I didn't really understand how intense it was going to be. Plus, I had a very high tolerance. Like I said, I was doing about 3 grams a day, and I was quitting cold turkey. Um, I detoxed at home with my mother taking care of me for about 6 days on her couch. And my body detoxes very hard. It can't handle that. It got to the point where my muscles were cramping. My potassium had dropped dangerously low. And I was actually transported to the hospital here and admitted for my potassium being so low and it affecting my heart rhythm. They say if you're below 2.5, you could possibly die. When I arrived at the hospital, I was at 2.2. Was so dehydrated, I had to get an IV in between my knuckles until I had enough in me where they could give it to me in my inner arm. After that, I had IVs in both of my arms with saline and a potassium drip. I was there for about 3 days communicating with my probation officer through it, and that's when Vivitrol got brought up to me. Vivitrol is a monthly injection that you can get. It's not addicting or anything like Suboxone. You get the injection, it curbs cravings. You're not supposed to have your using dreams or anything like that. So I was down, but when I got out of the hospital, it was a Saturday, and then Monday was a holiday. So getting out of the hospital, I remember I called my probation officer scared and crying that I was getting sent home for 2 days and I wasn't going to have anything. I didn't understand what I was supposed to do for these 2 days. I was so scared. So I went home. I stayed home and I waited until my appointment. I went in, I got my first Vivitrol injection, and started from there. I guess I didn't really know anybody in recovery. Everybody I knew was still out there using. So they started a drug court in my town called the Recovery Docket. So I began with that. Several of us who had just, gotten sober, whatever, had cases through the court. We had to go once a week, and there was a judge and several other people on the panel that you'd go up, talk about your week, whatever, what's going on. So I did that for a while. This is when I started getting introduced to meetings. I would go and sit in the back and maybe not talk. Because it was all different to me. It was all so new, but I was around people who knew what I was feeling and could understand what I was talking about. So eventually I started talking to people and getting a little bit more involved. But then I started dating somebody who was a user. They were currently using opiates, my drug of choice, and I was gonna fix him and get him sober. And I dealt with that for probably like 2 to 3 years. And during that time, I was sober until I wasn't. Um, I relapsed. I had purchased pain pills. Um, didn't get the high I wanted. I had already experienced heroin, and pain pills just did not touch what I could get off something else. So I had asked my boyfriend to let me have some of his, and he agreed. I was scared because at this point there was fentanyl in it and people were overdosing. So we agreed that I was going to do just a little bit and wait an hour and see how I felt, and then I could have more. So I did the little bit, and anytime when I'm high, I nod out frequently. So I can remember doing that one and waiting an hour and asking for more. I did the more, and I can remember watching TV and nodding out. And next thing I remember, I wake up on my side to my boyfriend beating my back, and I begin throwing up, and he told me I had overdosed and he had Narcan'd me. Uh, Thankfully I had been in recovery before and I had Narcan available in my house. Uh, and so I was Narcan'd, I overdosed. It scared me a little bit. I didn't use for a few days, and then I did it again, and it got to the point where I started using again every day. So then this is the first time I went to treatment, like actual rehab. So I went to rehab. It was court ordered. It was a place here outside of Tiffin. And I met a lot of good girls there. I wouldn't say the treatment was very high quality. The most I got out of the program was I met a girl who had had sobriety before and worked the 12 steps, and she would go through books with me and go over the 12 steps with me, and I got a lot out of that. So after finishing that program, I decided to go to more meetings. I met somebody at a 12-step meeting. I'd asked them to be my sponsor. And I started getting involved that way. She actually helped me a lot because I know in 12-step fellowships, they speak a lot about God, and people think Jesus, God, that type of thing. So I really struggled with that because I'm not a religious person. And I'm lucky that I found a sponsor that explained the whole higher power concept to me and told me that's not necessarily what it is, and your higher power can be whatever you choose. So I feel like the universe and like karma and vibes are what helped me. So I did that. I did a lot of 12-step work. I began working with Ohio Can, which is a nonprofit here in Ohio that hosts people in recovery from substance use. They also help family members impacted. Even if you're somebody who's still using, they're involved in harm reduction. They just want to keep everybody safe and give a little bit of love to everybody. So I was thriving and doing well. I was very involved, but I was still with a man who used. So some sobriety lasted for a little bit. I made it to a little bit over a year, and I began using again. Um, I was on probation still, so they would send me to jail. So I got myself into a detox program and I went to the detox. I was, like I said, I detox differently than others. I was actually transported from the detox facility to the hospital because I needed an IV because of my dehydration and my potassium dropping. I did all that. I actually had myself a bed at a sober living in Sandusky, which is about an hour away from where I live. And probation refused to let me go to the sober living and they sentenced me to jail. So I got sent to jail for my first time. And I was under the impression that I was going to sit 60 days. And I got referred to a new drug court here in Tiffin that had been around for a couple years called Pivot. So when I got to jail, I thought I was going to be sitting 60 days. But after already going to detox and being sober, that benefited me. They could speed up my paperwork and get me out a lot quicker. So I sat 20 days in jail and was released on the court program. It's very intense. You have to call every day and they say yes or no, whether you have to drop. There's a lot of classes. And thankfully, when I first started, I was living at home with my parents, so a job wasn't necessary. I could focus on my recovery and focus on my classes. Um, I got back on Vivitrol and I did very well. It's a 14-month drug court program and I completed it in 14 months. I did the dance, I did exactly what I had to. After that, they release you onto regular probation to monitor you a little bit longer. It's just not as strict. So I did that. I did that for about a year and then I successfully completed probation. Um, I still did okay for a while, but this is the first time I was sober and didn't have anything to hold me accountable. So I continued Vivitrol, continued meetings, was still involved with Ohio Can, and then we actually made a bigger group of Ohio Can and combined several counties. Um, and then so I'm working with more people. And it began to get really, really stressful because I'm depending on other people and other people aren't following through. So a lot of stuff's falling on my shoulders. I get very stressed out. I'm very anxious easily. So I had all this stress going on with Ohio Can. I backed away from Ohio Can and actually dropped out. Um, Shortly after that, I decided to get off of Vivitrol. I don't really remember why, probably because I had made it so long and was doing okay. So I stopped doing Vivitrol and I got my wisdom teeth out and I was not honest with the oral surgeon to let them know my addiction history. So I left with a prescription of Vicodin. I didn't think it was a big deal and I thought I would be okay. It was just Vicodin. I'd been sober how long? Well, I got this script of Vicodin. I had it gone within 2 days. And after that, I began seeking other painkillers on the street. And it didn't start out every day. I'd do it a day and then I would do it again for a week and then I'd do it 2 days and not do it again. And then eventually I was doing it every day. And this is I have a boyfriend during all of this. He had moved down from Michigan. We had been together a year and then he moved down from Michigan to move in with me. Um so going through all this, relapsing and stuff, I feel like he knew, but he didn't really say much. Because I was working, I still like always, I still had a job and I was involved in stuff. And like even though I had relapsed, I was still helping people and still going here and doing this, uh, trying to put on a facade. So then when the pills are too expensive as before, somebody had the other stuff and that's what I really liked and so I just ended up right back there. But drugs have changed a lot since I first started doing them. Now you're really not even sure what you're gonna get. So I was back on the junk and trying to maintain having a job. I actually switched from one job to another because the one job was stressful and I thought maybe that was a contributing factor to it. So I switched to another less stressful job, but I really just continued to use. Um, Picked up a second job because using isn't cheap. Um, and I was working two jobs, and then it got to the point where I obviously knew I was gonna have to stop. I had a lot of recovery before, and I've thrown it away. You don't lose all that information when you relapse. So like I felt a lot of guilt just for myself. I couldn't believe I had brought myself back to the same situation that I had been in several times before. So I had talked my I finally had opened up to my boyfriend and, was honest that I had been using, and he knew I wanted to stop. I thought I had some plan that I was gonna find some Subutex or something on the street to help me get through withdrawal and I'd still be able to work. Well, I finally found some, and so I tried to detox at home. Um, it was a very emotional night. My boyfriend had to take my car keys from me. I was gonna leave. I was gonna go get something. Um, I tried to get comfortable and take a bath. My muscles were killing me. It was starting to get to the really bad part of the detox. And it really got to the point it was 2 in the morning and my boyfriend was calling detox facilities to try to get me in there now. In a place I had actually been before, had a bed and they were gonna take me at 2 o'clock in the morning. Um, I had ate a bunch of sleeping pills, so it was kind of foggy. I was hoping I could just fall asleep and sleep through some of it, but he set up the detox. So I don't remember my ride there. When we got there, I remember he had to fill out my paperwork for me. So I get in there. I did finally sleep, and the next morning was still pretty foggy because I ate a lot of sleeping pills. But I stayed there for a week. And my plan was to just leave and get on Vivitrol. Typically, you could be clean about a week and then get on Vivitrol, but with the way the substances are now, I wasn't peeing clean until 14 days after stopping using substances. So I had to come home and wait until I was clean enough to go get the Vivitrol shot. I lied to both of my employers and told them I had some issue that I was admitted to the hospital for. Both very caring people, very caring companies. I was off a week when I went to detox and then I stayed home for a week because I was very fragile, very weak. My brain was still mush. I couldn't even think straight. After 2 weeks, I got back on Vivitrol. I showed up to a meeting that was women only. Um, to try to get back into the 12-step fellowship. I went into a meeting still feeling crummy, still coming out of detox. And I was honest with everybody about my situation. I met an older woman there. I heard the way she talked, and I want what she's got. So I had asked her to be my sponsor. And yeah, from there, I stayed on Vivitrol. I worked with my new sponsor. Um, I do a lot of stuff with Ohio Can. I joined that again. But I'm only handling my own county, Seneca County, where I don't have to work with these other people that stress me out so much. I'm also a naloxone distributor through Harm Reduction Ohio, so I train and I also give that out. I still try to love people even if they still use substances and keep them safe. I have fentanyl and xylazine test strips. I give out Plan B pills. I give out condoms. I give out pregnancy tests. I really just try to be the person that I wish I had around when I was out there. Somebody with like information and somebody who really genuinely cared and wanted to help somebody out. So yeah, now I'm at a year and a half sober again. I have worked my 12 steps. I moved on from the less stressful job and I took on a big girl job. I'm a supervisor for housekeeping and laundry at a nursing home. I try my best to give other people chances. People in recovery who have been in some trouble before. I like to try to give people opportunities with jobs. I stay involved in my community. I feel like I did all my destruction and stuff here in Seneca County. So these are the people I want to help and I want to get the word out. We raise funds through Ohio Can. We call it a gift of love. People that are in recovery, family members who maybe are taking care of kids. We've helped with Christmas presents at Christmas time, Easter baskets. We've helped with sober living, rent payments, groceries, clothing, all kinds of stuff. So when we do fundraisers, all the money goes right back into helping the community, and that's just I like to get out and share my story so people know that it's possible. And even though I have some relapses, um, you didn't lose all the information you had, and it just really matters what you do afterwards if you're gonna pick yourself up or if you're gonna continue on. So